From abandoned amusement park projects to massive infrastructure pieces, here are 9 ambitious abandoned objects. Number 9. Wonderland Amusement Park. This is the story of the Wonderland Amusement Park, which was meant to be a major landmark of amusement and entertainment for China. Until it wasn't. China and the US have always been competitive, and they've always tried to one-up each other in various ways. Due to the success of Disneyland and Disney World, China decided to have their own massive amusement park that would try and put Disney's to shame. In fact, it was designed to be the biggest amusement park in all of Asia, which is no small feat when you consider some of the parks that are on the continent. So what happened? Wonderland Amusement was about half built when it was besieged by a slew of problems. There were money problems, investors started to drop out of the project, and then the people in the area surrounding the half-built park rose up to protest its development. Among these were farmers who didn't want their crops to be so close to this massive park. Eventually, it was all too much, and the half-finished park was never completed and just remained there in its incomplete state for some time. Ironically, though, people did visit the park just to see how it looked. That is, until it was torn down in 2013. Most ironic of all is that China is now home to Disney's Shanghai resort, which was not only fully constructed but incredibly successful, showing that sometimes it's easier to just go with the flow instead of trying to buck against it. Number 8. Duga Radar Station. During the days of the Soviet Union, the nation of Russia was bent on construction in various ways, including building things that would help them keep their nation safe from potential threats, as well as detecting what others might be playing for them. Thus, in the Ukraine, they made the Duga Radar Station, which was meant to be a missile defense early warning system. To be clear, not only was the station functional, it had a lot of power going through it, to the extent that it earned the name the Russian woodpecker, because randomly it would put out loud blasts of sound across radio stations in a fast format, not unlike a woodpecker blasting its beak against a tree. Regardless of its quirks, the site was functional and was even used to detect a missile launch from another country, so why does it stand abandoned? Simple. It was too close to Chernobyl. That's right. When the deadly failure of the nuclear reactor happened, the dish array was in its range. Thus, the Russians decided to take what they could from the dish and build 2 new and more advanced radar stations in safer locations. Because of it being in the Chernobyl exclusion zone, the place cannot be occupied, so thus it will remain until it's demolished. Or not. And now for number 7. But first, be sure to subscribe if you're new here, and let me know which place you would like to visit in the comments below. Number 7. The Bazludza Monument. The Bazludza Monument that you'll find in Bulgaria is something rather unique overall. Originally, the monument was constructed in the Cold War. Bulgaria was under communist rule, and the government decided to build this massive structure to house the Communist Party within the country, which at the time was honestly a common thing. They went all out on the construction and design of the building, including making sure it was massive enough to fit everyone and have plenty of communist symbols and posters all over the place. But the Cold War ended and communism died with it. Thus, Bulgaria found itself with a massive building with no true purpose. So it was closed down to the public in 1989, and it remains abandoned to this day. But just because it's abandoned doesn't mean the story ended there, because it didn't. Due to it being left alone and thus no one maintaining it, a slew of things happened, including nature growing all over it and even roof panels being stolen. As such, if you were to go inside, you'd see a mix of nature and man-made architecture. Either way, despite communism being gone for decades now, it still remains, is still abandoned, and that's not likely to change anytime soon. Number 6. Kiev Garage 7. There are many abandoned buildings and projects in the nation of Ukraine, but none of them save one looks like a giant flying saucer. This is Kiev Garage 7. It was opened by the Soviets in 1973 and was designed by a little-known architect named V. Zinkovic, which can be proven because no other bus station like this has ever been built again. The garage was an important hub for Kiev's international, domestic, and bus city routes with around 1,400 employees and 400 buses operating daily, which is why the shape was so necessary, as it had a bunch of buses and people moving in and out every single day. The construction lasted 8 years. One former long-term staff member who asked not to be named told CNN Travel, "It was the most beautiful bus park in Ukraine and Europe at the time. We served the international routes to Czechoslovakia, Moldova, Germany, and Poland. Despite all of that business, The garage was eventually shut down in 2015 due to the financial crisis going on in the Ukraine, as well as the stopping of international travel via buses. Thus, the buses that were left in the circus, as it was known, were left to rot, and many still reside there today, though the people of Ukraine are trying to make it come back to life in their own way. Number 5. Prora. Once upon a time in World War II, Adolf Hitler and his German forces were conquering much of the modern world. But for Hitler, it wasn't just about conquering. He wanted to establish a Third Reich that truly lasts for generations and be a golden age for his people, but also his loyal followers of his party. So he decided that he would establish a luxury resort hotel called Prora, which was a massive complex located in Regen, Germany. I do mean it was massive, by the way. With the 8 identical buildings that were made, the complex was over 2.8 miles long, and of course, like any good resort, it was right next to the beach. Now, if you're wondering what happened to it, it wasn't fully finished at the time, and then when World War II ended, it became a military base for the Soviets, then East Germany and others. But wait, there's a twist. Because eventually in 2013, a construction company came forward and bought the complex and honestly turned it into not just a luxury resort, but a permanent hotel that is primarily populated by youths. This was definitely not what Hitler had in mind when he wanted to make this. Number 4. Ross Island, India. Located in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, Ross Island off the coast of India was an important British settlement during the 19th century. Specifically, it was a small island used to house and work Indian mutineers. Their job was to clear the thick forest that the island had so that other structures could be built. This went on for some time until World War II broke out. In 1942, the island was shut down for numerous reasons, including the fact that the death rate of the people of the island started to climb severely high thanks to a disease transmitted through the water supply. Furthermore, with the Japanese army aiming to control the Pacific and its islands, the penal colony was deemed too dangerous to continue on. With no one there to keep cutting things down, all hopes of building things were abandoned because the trees took over, including growing through and around the settlements that were there, creating some very unique visuals in the process. However, the Indian government has decreed that there will be no further human settlements on Ross Island, which might be for the best. Number 3. Turkey's Sleeping Beauty Village. One of the beautiful things about construction is that it can take many forms and be inspired by many things. Turkey, for example, was inspired by the Sleeping Beauty Castle at Walt Disney World in Florida and decided to make an entire village based on the architecture of that singular castle. The goal was to make a village that had an American-style feel with a shopping mall, gardens, and of course everyone living in a castle. Believe it or not, this project wasn't from decades ago. It was from 2014, and construction did indeed start in the Burj Al Babas village. In fact, hundreds of the Sleeping Beauty-style castles were built in full. The Soro Group did indeed do what it was supposed to do, before things went south. A financial crisis gripped the country and thus funding for the project dried up. The Soro Group filed for bankruptcy, and thus the village now stands only partly constructed and full of empty castles. By this point in time, it was supposed to be operational, but that didn't happen. Could the project be finished one day? Absolutely. The castles are still viable homes, but as in all things, it's a question of money and time. Number 2. Pripyat Amusement Park. Many parks that have been shut down are very much victims of circumstance, but no one could have predicted what would happen to the Pripyat Amusement Park. Pripyat itself was once a thriving city in the Soviet Union. At its peak in 1986, the Ukrainian city had over 50,000 people living in it. Because of its great lands and happy people, the Soviet Union felt they deserved a reward, an amusement park, a grand one as well, complete with Ferris wheel and other rides, and the beautiful park was going to open on May 1st of 1986. But just a few days before, the Chernobyl disaster happened. This caused nuclear radiation to be spread for miles around, including to the Pripyat Amusement Park. Needless to say, no one went to the amusement park on its opening day or for a very long time after it. The radiation from the meltdown lingered for a very long time, and it actually infused itself with the metal of the park. Now, how bad the radiation is in the park today is up for debate, but it can be extremely deadly. As such, it's labeled as a place for extreme tourism. While many do go there, it's eerie to see a place that was made to reward people, and now it stands as a reminder of all that was lost. Number 1. Suisun Bay Reserve Fleet. At the end of World War II, 350 ships were made and gathered in Suisun Bay in California and given the order to be ready for combat and deployment at a moment's notice. The ships were clumped together to save space and to make sure they were ready. Despite the war eventually ending, it didn't stop the order for the ships, mainly because the United States felt that there would be more use for the ships and threats that were surely to come. However, despite this being true in the large scale, the ships weren't used and the whole fleet was basically abandoned. The ships remained for years just sitting in the bay until eventually they sank, were scrapped for parts or used for other things. Ironically, it wasn't until 2017 that an official order was given to shut the fleet down for good. Thanks for watching. What did you think of these incredible abandoned objects? Would you like to have seen these places completed? Which of these do you feel was easily the biggest failure? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe and I'll see you next time on the channel.